Hello, friend. Welcome to Grandpa's Horror Stories. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your own stories. All story rights reserved to original authors. Join us now and let our stories come to life. I slept with an incubus. It was supposed to be a one-night stand. I met him in a dimly lit bar in Prague during a layover. No one aspect of his appearance would have given away the fact that he was a demon, but taken as a whole, you immediately got the sense that he was different. His teeth had an uncanny whiteness, and he was chiseled in a way that made him look more like a statue than a man. I'd never learn his true name, but he let me call him Green. Buy me an absinthe, I told him, but he rolled his eyes. I've got no interest in easy prey, he said. Maybe I'm not as easy as you think. He looked through me as if I wasn't there. Go ahead then, he said after a few seconds. Make me jealous. Maybe it'll change my mind. Right away, I knew I wanted to please him, so I did exactly what Head suggested. I found the next hottest guy at the bar and spent 20 minutes drinking with him before I took him on the dance floor. Then I ground against him as music pulsed around us. Never once did I break eye contact with Green. As the night wore on, I let my dancing grow increasingly depraved. As I did, I could see a darkness building within Green. He couldn't stop watching me now. His body tensed, a ball of irrepressible fury. Finally, he walked over to me and whispered, "Bring him back to your room. He'll follow." The other guy from the bar was barely able to walk as we headed back to my hotel. Green followed a few steps behind. Finally, we arrived. "Go on then," said Green. "Let him take you in. He'll be here when it's finished." And so I did. I took the man back to the bed and let him on top of me. We had sex, barely, and then he passed out. I walked to the door and let Green in. His face was contorted with rage. "What did you do?" he asked, his eyes burning. "You told me to before I could say another word," he screamed and ran to the sleeping man, pressing his open mouth to the top of his skull. Then I heard the terrible crunching of bones as the drunk man's body began to implode, the bones and organs liquefying within his skin as his entire body was sucked into Green's open mouth, skull first. Not one drop of blood escaped as Green sucked him down like a snake consuming a rat. When it was done, not a single piece of the man remained. I screamed and ran for the door, but Green moved faster than I could have imagined, blocking my way. "This is what you wanted," he said. "Now you've got me. Please," I begged. "Don't kill me. Don't kill me." "How could I do a thing like that?" he asked. "I've fallen in love with you. I'm here to protect you forever." I was shaking, sobbing, and yet when I looked into his eyes, I found myself wanting him more than any man I'd ever met. Slowly, he led me to the bed and removed his clothes, revealing a body glowing from within with red light. At his back, I felt the nubs where his wings might have once been. And when I slept with him, it was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Even in my fantasies, his body seemed to contort and move such that no part of my skin wasn't touching his, and when he kissed me, I felt the pull of his breath, knowing he could swallow me whole at the merest whim. And then it was done. He quickly stood and dressed. "Goodbye," he said. "Goodbye." Soon enough, I was flying to another city, handing out peanuts and cocktails to the passengers on another flight. Then we landed and night fell. Another dimly lit bar, and there he was, lurking in the corner. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "Make me jealous," he said. "Poor Dant. I'm just sitting here." I looked around the bar. The men all looked disgusting to me now. I could barely stomach the thought of taking one home, and if I did, I knew what would happen to them now. "I can't," I said. "That was just once." "Then I'll just drink my drink," he said. I walked back to the bar and ordered a shot, and then another. Before I knew it, a group of businessmen walked in, and one started trying to talk to me. He wasn't bad looking, but he had a ring on his finger. "Would your wife want you talking to a pretty girl in a bar like this?" I asked. "She knows who I am," he said, letting his arm fall on my thigh, and not sure he deserved to die. He might have been a perfectly nice guy most of the time, but that night he was happy to follow me back to my room, and just like his predecessor, he ended up in Green's stomach. "I knew we'd end up here again," Green said. "How? Because I know you. For almost a year, we went on like that. I'm not sure how many I fed him, maybe 50. Most of them probably deserved it, but not all. If the men seen Kent, if they backed off, Polly tell ye, let them go. If they were drunk and aggressive, I let them take me back to the room. If I'm going to be honest, I was obsessed. If even a few nights went by without Green, I started feeling sick. My skin felt loose on my bones, and my throat would get dry. My body ached, and nothing would heal me but him. And so I'd find myself back at the bar, looking for another man bad enough to take home. And then I met Mark. He wasn't a guy from a bar. He was just a nice guy on my street in Atlanta. There came a point where I ended up at home for a month. The airline said I should take some personal time since I was starting to look run down, and I started seeing him walk his dog every morning. It wasn't the same feeling I had with Green. Mark had more of a dad bod, but kindness radiated off him. "Hey," he said one day as I mustered the courage to walk outside. "Tara, right, I was starting to think you were a myth. People keep talking about this jet-setting stewardess that supposedly lives in the neighborhood. And mostly real," I said. "Just gone a lot. Well, if you ever need a home-cooked meal, I make a decent mac and cheese." "Sure," I said. Sometime, and then a few days later, he showed up at my doorstep holding a casserole dish. "Surprise," he said. "Someday is today. You didn't have to do this," I said. He shrugged. I wanted to. It wasn't until I took the first bite of mac and cheese that I realized how hungry I felt. Looking over at the mirror in the dining room, I saw a skeletal ghost of a woman who vaguely resembled me. When had I stopped eating? When was the last time I'd gone to bed sober? I scarfed down a bowl of food. Then another. "Careful," said Mark. "You're going to make yourself sick." And he was right. An hour later, I found myself nauseous, barely able to stand. Mark practically carried me up to my room and tucked me under the covers. Then he found an extra blanket and settled in an easy chair in the corner. "You can go if you want," I said. "It'll be fine. I'll leave if you make me," he said. "But it might be better if someone keeps an eye on you." "That sound okay?" I nodded weakly and fell asleep. That night I woke to see Green at the door. He approached Mark, his body tensed with rage, his mouth opening to eat. "Stop," I said. "You can't. We didn't even." "I don't care," he said. "I told you at the start. him a jealous creature. Whether you slept with him or not is just a detail. Groggy, I crawled out of bed, trying to get between them. Stay away, I said, but Green just laughed. Then he picked me up by the neck and pinned me up against the wall. The breath went out of me as he assessed me with hungry eyes. I've always wondered what you'd taste like, he whispered. The truth is, I think you'd like it. When I eat them, when I suck them down my throat, they moan with the greatest pleasure you could imagine. Of course, it's only me that hears it. I think you're ready for it now, to disappear. In a wave of pleasure, fear swelled inside me, bubbling up from my stomach. I could see the reality of my own death unfolding before me, my limp body falling to the floor, empty of soul. I could imagine Mark waking to find me like that, the way he'd shout for help and hold me lifeless in his arms. Or even worse, what if Green ate us both? I could imagine Mark disappearing down the demon's throat, his dog waiting at home night after night, wonder if he'd ever get taken on a walk again. I kicked and clawed at Green, but I was no more effective than a toddler batting at his dad, and yet it felt good to fight. I hadn't fought for anything in so long. And then, as the light began to leave my eyes, I really saw him. His skin was no longer radiant, but loose and sullen. His hungry eyes were hollow. Track marks ran up and down his body, like an addict who'd run out of places to jab. And worst of all were the burn scars. They ran everywhere, terrible peaks and valleys of 1,000 lashes with a whip of fire. I see you, I whispered. I see your scars. He took a step back, dropping me on the floor. He looked down, repulsed at his own body. You're seeing things, he said. Your eyes will readjust. You'll see my beautiful form again. No, I said. He smiled. You'll itch for me, he said, trying to hide his body with his arms as he backed away into the dark. You'll beg for me. Your memory of this will fade. You'll think back to Prague, that first night in the hotel when I gave you pleasures you never imagined, and you'll scream out in the night for me to come back. Well, see, I said, weakly, holding my throat. In the morning, I woke to see Mark standing over me, reaching down a hand to help me up. You slept for like 14 hours, he said. You must have been exhausted. Hungry, I nodded weakly. Lucky for you, I know how to make pancakes too. Come on. It's only been a few days since that morning. I've spent most of them with Mark, him eating better, not drinking, the girl in the mirror is starting to look a little more recognizable. Slowly, I haven't slept with Mark yet. Am not sure if I will. I think I want to. I think he'd survive. I don't know all the rules. Sometimes, as I go to sleep, I imagine waking up next to him as an old woman, hearing the footsteps of children, maybe even grandchildren downstairs. And other times I think of Green, the way he'd pull my body into his, almost like I was flying. He'll stand at my window, looking into the dark street, thinking I see him leaning against a lamp pole, and I imagine calling his name.